We begin this morning, though, with President Donald Trump. He's expected to speak with Russian President Vladimir Putin by phone in just a matter of hours. The two leaders are expected to discuss the Syrian civil war. It will be their third conversation since President Trump took office.
Meanwhile, the White House is now defending Mr. Trump's recent comments about Kim Jong Un. In an interview yesterday, the president said that he would be honored to meet with the North Korean dictator under the right circumstances.
This comes as tensions in the region continue to rise. Two U.S. bombers flew in a practice mission over South Korea yesterday, and today North Korea said the exercise pushed the situation closer to the brink of nuclear war. Our Major Garrett is at the White House with more.
He's safe. I mean, who's safe? The guy's got nuclear weapons.
In several interviews Monday, President Trump denounced North Korea's nuclear program and pursuit of ballistic missile technology.
We have 28,000 troops on the line, and they're right there. And so nobody's safe. We're probably not safe over here. If he gets the long-range missiles, we're not safe either.
North Korea has not carried out a new nuclear test, as some analysts feared. Even so, dictator Kim Jong Un's government threatened to bolster its nuclear force to the maximum. With tensions high, the president told Bloomberg News he, quote, would absolutely negotiate with the North Korean leader, adding, quote, I would be honored to do it.
He is still the head of state.
White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer rationalized why talking to Kim, a ruthless leader who has starved his own people and assassinated political rivals, would be an honor.
There's a diplomatic piece to this, but the bottom line is the president's going to do what he has to do.
Closer to home, the president discussed another conflict he says could have been averted: the Civil War.
I mean, had Andrew Jackson been a little bit later, you wouldn't have had the Civil War.
Mr. Trump said in a radio interview that President Andrew Jackson, who was a slave owner, could have negotiated a solution to decades of division over slavery and its economics.
He was really angry that he saw what was happening with regard to the Civil War. He said there's no reason for this.
Jackson, who died 16 years before the start of the Civil War, is seen by Mr. Trump as a populist inspiration, something he discussed with Face the Nation's John Dickerson.
The picture of Andrew Jackson I put up, because they said his campaign and my campaign tended to mirror each other.
And our Major Garrett joins us now from the White House. So, Major, we'll get to Andrew Jackson in a moment, but let's begin with North Korea. What are the implications of the president saying he'd be honored to meet with Kim Jong Un?
Well, at one level, it is the president conferring some measure of respect toward Kim Jong Un, something he began in the interview with John Dickerson and Face the Nation over the weekend, in which he described Kim Jong Un as a smart cookie, someone who, as a young leader, had to fend off a lot of rivalries within the structure of complicated and sometimes viciously violent North Korean politics. So in these two different episodes, the president is trying to show some measure of respect to Kim Jong Un. Now, that may be a tactic to reduce the potential volatility of the relationship between the two countries, but it also just creates yet another surprising dynamic, of which there have been many in the president's dealings with this North Korea issue. And it does create in the minds of those trying to watch and measure this new president's words what exactly he means, and more importantly, what his intentions are. Because there is a great distance, a vast distance between any American president saying they would be willing to meet Kim Jong Un, something that no American president has done, not just with Kim, but with any leader of the DPRK since its founding. No American president has met with any leader. So to say that publicly and to at least create that idea, that possibility, leaves a lot of America's Asian allies wondering what the president's intentions are. And on that score, he's been not very clear at all.
Well, you know, Major, the White House was sort of quick to emphasize that the president would only meet with him under the right circumstances. But do we have any indication what those circumstances would be?
And those are the president's own words in the context of that interview. And the circumstances would be a complete decision, irrevocable, final, and confirmed by outside investigators that North Korea has abandoned not only its pursuit of ballistic missile technology, but nuclear weapons themselves. North Korea has nuclear weapons. It is trying to develop ballistic missile technology capable of delivering a nuclear warhead either to the mainland of the United States or places in between. And it's that threat that has so conspicuously captured the attention of the Trump administration. So if Kim Jong Un were to abandon all of that, there wouldn't be much more to talk about other than perhaps the United States assisting North Korea and its population, which has for many decades, maybe not decades, but many, many years, been systematically starved by the North Korean regime in order to feed its military and its pursuit of nuclear weapons and other related technologies. So it is hard to imagine a circumstance under which these talks could actually occur, because the North Koreans have shown no interest whatsoever, not just during this administration, but previous American presidencies, to abandon its nuclear weapons program.
Major, as we mentioned, we know that the president is expected to speak by phone today to Russian President Vladimir Putin. We know that Syria is on the agenda. What else are we hearing?
Syria is mostly on the agenda. This is the big topic because Syria is Russia's client state, and much of what happens within the dictatorial actions of the Assad regime, Bashar al-Assad, the dictatorial leader of Syria, happens at the sufferance of the Russian government in Moscow, and with substantial financial backing from Russian oligarchs and military backing from the Russian government. And this administration is trying to figure out a way to negotiate an end to the Syrian regime of Bashar al-Assad. That cannot happen without Russia's agreement and certainly intervention. There's no sign Russia wants to do that, but Syria is principally the topic between the two leaders. Obviously, Ukraine falls in there as well. The administration has been critical about the ongoing violence there, but the main issue is Syria.
So, of course, before we let you go, Major, we have to talk to you about the Andrew Jackson Civil War comments. Has the White House made any effort to sort of clean up the president's remarks? He sort of made them at the beginning of a radio interview. They weren't quite into the formal part of the interview yet, but that's where it occurred.
Sure. Well, the president put out a tweet about 12 hours ago acknowledging the historical fact that Andrew Jackson died 16 years before the Civil War, but said he would never have wanted it to happen, and he saw it coming. Okay, let's just peel this back a little bit. What did Andrew Jackson see during his presidency? Did he see a crisis, a sectional crisis developing in our country? Yes, he did. Was it precisely over slavery? No, it wasn't. It was over something called a nullification crisis, which was South Carolina objecting to tariffs that it considered to be disproportionately favorable to northern states. And South Carolina said, we're going to nullify that tariff. We are not going to collect it on behalf of the federal government. Andrew Jackson, as the 7th president of the United States, not only warned South Carolina that any behavior along this line would be considered treasonous, he went to Congress and obtained the legal right to send federal forces to South Carolina to enforce that tariff. So, did Andrew Jackson have a sense that South Carolina and possibly other states, masquerading their grievance, which had been running for decades about slavery and its underlying economics, might pull out of the Union over that and related issues, all under the banner of states' rights? Yes, Andrew Jackson had some awareness of that. But there's nothing about the Andrew Jackson presidency that tells us, had he been alive, he could have averted that crisis, the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln couldn't avert that crisis. And in that interview, President Trump said, nobody asked the question, Civil War, why? There is literally no question in American history asked and answered through more books than the Civil War. More than the Revolutionary War, more than any other conflict in American history. There are more books about Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War than any other American president, and for good reason. So we'll leave it at that.
Yes.
Absolutely, Major. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think there have been some who have been fairly generous to the president to say that, in fact, perhaps his comments had to do with that nullification crisis. But as you know, Major, as a student of history, it was Andrew Jackson himself who said, our federal union, it must be preserved. And that was his position.
And his vice president, John C. Calhoun, became the first vice president in American history. There was only one other, Spiro Agnew, to resign from office and go to the Senate. Why? So he could defend the nullification idea, defend states' rights, and carry on his defense of slavery. Okay? That's another historical fact that's crucial to any sense or argumentation that what the president was referring to was the nullification crisis. He never said so, so that is the fairest and most charitable interpretation of his remarks. And even with that charity, they do not line up with history.
All right, Major Garrett.